Hello, welcome back to the Villa View. It's time for a match preview as Villa take on Newcastle on Saturday lunchtime at 12:30. Looking forward to this one, as you could probably tell from the Stato preview yesterday. Joined by my Sky Sports News colleague, very professional Dave Reid with the lapel mic. How are you, Dave?
All right, yeah. What time do you call this, Dan?
I know,
Everyone's waiting in the comments.
absolute disastrous internet situation from me. Need to get a long-term fixing. It's fair to say, Dave, this is a terrible segue. The long-term fix and the short-term fix is in for Villa because Villa are absolutely flying. But this is a huge game, 6th v 3rd. I find it so refreshing. It's like going back to the year 2000. Villa 6th, Newcastle 3rd. It's good for the Premier League, I think, to have some different teams involved. This feels like the biggest game Villa have had in the Premier League for decades, really.
Oh, yeah, a decades might be a bit strong there, Dan. But yeah,
Well, okay, I'll rephrase that.
You threw me there with decades.
We've had relegation games because we were so terrible for years in the Premier League since about 2010. But now this just feels like a huge game in the Premier League terms. For Villa to get Europe now would be massive, and we're taking on the team that's 3rd in the league, and it's not one of the usual big boys. It's just everything around it. I'm so excited, and it just feels huge.
Yeah, it does. I mean, putting to one side the whole Saudi Arabia situation with Newcastle,
Yeah.
just the football, just talking about the football here, I get what you mean when you're talking about it's refreshing to have different clubs in the mix for that. And Newcastle and Villa have kind of had this ongoing rivalry after the whole relegation thing. And it feels quite nice now that we're both on the level where we're trying to challenge at the top end of the table. Newcastle are obviously a little bit further in their progression than Villa are, but it does seem quite nice that now two obviously huge clubs are kind of fighting at the right end of the table now.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's important to always talk about the ownership issue, but if you just look at it from pure football terms, two managers now who are absolutely excelling have done wonders for their sides, completely revolutionised the sides that they're managing. I think from both teams' perspectives, Villa obviously haven't done much transfer business since Emery arrived, and you're right, Newcastle are further ahead in their development than Villa. But the improvement in players that have been there for years under these two managers, it shows how talented they both are. And it shows not only are they great managers, they're good coaches as well.
And the subplot to this game is, of course, that Unai Emery could have easily been in the Newcastle dugout for this game on Saturday. He interviewed really well for the Newcastle job and was offered the job, and then the news ended up getting leaked, and Villarreal persuaded him to stay in Spain a little bit longer. And then fast forward, he's now at Aston Villa, and Eddie Howe managed to get the job at Newcastle after they offered it to Unai Emery. But you're right, the two coaches have seen a remarkable turnaround at Newcastle in particular. I know Eddie Howe's had such a longer period of time than Unai Emery has had, but he's created this this siege mentality. He's brought the city together outside of the football, and he's brought the team together. And as you say, he's coached some of these players that we're going to see on Saturday afternoon and improved lots and lots of them. Jacob Murphy, you could rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? When you think about Cher and Dan Burn, who's elevated his level. We know he's a good player anyway, but Sean Longstaff and Joe Linton's the obvious one.
He's the biggest one, isn't
Almiron, and you can reel off the players that he's improved. And on the preview video last week that we did as well, that we kind of reeled off the players that Unai Emery's improved as well. So it works both ways. Two great coaches, and really exciting to see how they match up against each other on Saturday.
Yeah, I think you look at Newcastle. I think the big thing with them is Eddie Howe at Bournemouth. He's got a good record against Villa, by the way. Eddie Howe when he was Bournemouth manager. You always thought, yeah, but he just can't sort that defence out. A little bit like Forest this season. They're quite good going forwards, got some good players, but they just can't sort the defence out. The defence isn't right. I didn't know, and it will be his coaching staff as well. It won't just be Eddie Howe. But what he's done to Newcastle's defence, the way he's made them so tight defensively, they've only lost 3 games all season. They've got the best defensive record in the league. Nick Pope was an excellent pickup from Bournemouth. Shares on great form since Eddie Howe's come in. Botman's going to be a sensational footballer for years to come. But the cohesive unit, he's made them so solid overall, and they've got goals in them. And the defensive side of things wasn't something we really associated with Eddie Howe at Bournemouth.
Yeah, and their success has been built on that defensive solidity, really. But not only that, he's got them working as a unit across the whole pitch. I'm sure we'll get on to how they're going to try and press us at the weekend. But that press has really come into its own in the last few games. and given their winning run as well. And defensively as a unit, not just the back four, back five with Nick Pope at the midfield and the forwards as well, all working in unison, all working in harmony. And it makes for a really solid side off the ball.
Yeah, I'm interested to how Newcastle will set up this weekend. We'll come on to the striker situation because they've got 2 forward players that are absolutely banging form at the moment. But I do wonder how attacking they'll be coming to Villa Park, or whether they'll be a little bit more measured. We saw with Forest last week in the first half, Villa struggled to break them down a little bit. They sat off their 2 number 10s, just sat on Louise and John McGinn, and stopped Villa playing through the middle of the pitch and progressing how they wanted to. And I think Villa did struggle with that. And it was fortunate Bertrand Traoré scored so early in the second half from a mistake, because I think we may have still struggled to break Forest down. But I do wonder whether Newcastle will come here, and because they've got defensive strength, I do wonder whether they'll do something similar and kind of sit off Villa a bit and say, you come and break us down, and we'll hit you on the break.
It's a possibility. I just don't see it. I mean, Newcastle are absolutely flying at the moment, and I think they're going to come out of the blocks flying as well on Saturday. I think they're going to be all over us in our defensive third, trying to push us wide and really putting our centre backs under pressure on the ball. I think they're going to come out absolutely flying for us on Saturday. I really do, just because they will back themselves to beat anyone in this league. And I feel like the only times where they've gone into kind of defensive shape on a consistent basis were games against Arsenal, Manchester United, and games against other top sides as well. So I just feel like they'll fancy turning us over on Saturday, and I feel like they're going to come out the blocks flying at us and push high and use their ability off the ball as well to try and win the ball back high up the pitch.
I think at Villa Park, I've got a feeling. I mean, obviously it's my opinion, so I think I might be right and you might be wrong, Dave Reid. But I think if it was at Newcastle, I think absolutely yes, they do what you're saying. But it's going to be a fervent, is that even a word? Atmosphere at Villa Park on Saturday from both sets of fans, because there's always been this underlying little bit of a rivalry as well. I mean, some Newcastle fans will never forgive Villa for that banner when they got relegated. In our video yesterday, there was actually some goodwill between a couple of people, a Villa fan and a Newcastle fan, having a chat in the comments, which was nice. But there is kind of this underlying rivalry between the two now. I guess in years gone by, it's been because we've both been at the bottom end of the table and we've spent time in the Championship. Now towards the top, the 2 of the form teams in the Premier League, really. I mean, this is 2 of the top 4 form teams in the Premier League at the moment. Do you think that kind of mini rivalry that's there will play into it at all?
Not necessarily. I think it'll be more coming from the stands. You're right. It will be a fervent atmosphere.
That's the word I was looking for? Fervent, new word.
It will be a great atmosphere, and I think what Unai Emery likes is he likes cool heads, and I think Eddie Howe's the same. Really, he likes players to kind of feed off the crowd to a certain degree, but not so much that it dictates what they're trying to do on the field. So I feel like, yes, it will be a big atmosphere tomorrow, but I do feel like Unai Emery will have his game plan, Eddie Howe will have his game plan, and it will play out on the pitch with not too much interference from what's going on in the stands.
Yeah, be interesting to see what they do up front as well. Wilson and Isak have probably been rotating a little bit in the last few weeks, but St. Maximin's been on good form. Even someone like Jacob Murphy, player who's not really ever done anything in his career for Newcastle, wouldn't be someone you'd expect to be playing. He's been doing well as well, but you just got kind of get the feeling after the second half in their game last week, Wilson and Isak, because Isak can play wide as well, St. Maximin's out. You do kind of get the feeling that they both might end up on the pitch, and Wilson's got a decent record against Villa as well, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, I think it will kind of depend on game state. I'm not one of those people that thinks that he'll go with 2 up front and Isak and Wilson will start, just because the success of the 4-3-3 has been so good for them.
No, I think they'll play 4-3-3, but I think Isak will be in one of the wide positions.
Yeah, I mean it's possible, isn't it? I think against Brentford they kind of played. It was almost Willock as playing as the wide left and Joelinton in midfield, and they kind of rotated their positions. And Murphy was out wide. Almiron's obviously coming back from injury, but I don't think he's going to be fit enough to start. So he might want to feature and get some minutes towards the back end of the game. He obviously caused us some real issues in the away game at St James's Park, and he's been a key player. But Murphy, as you say, has come in and done exceptionally well. on that right-hand side. I do think probably Wilson and Isak will finish the game with both players on the pitch. It's just a question of whether they start now. It's interesting because Newcastle have used, I think, some of the fewest number of players this season, and now both Wilson and Isak are firing on all cylinders. That decision from Eddie Howe is kind of creeping up on him on both of them want to start. Both of them are good enough in form to start. So do we start both in this game?
Yeah, they've had injuries, haven't they? It feels like if one's been fit, the other one hasn't. So he hasn't had that big decision to make very many times through the season. Joel Linton's the big player for me. The improvement in his game has been unreal. You know, whether they play him on the wing or whether they play him in central midfield, he just performs and he leads that press. He presses so well. Probably one of the best pressers there actually is in the Premier League. Because if I was Newcastle manager, God forbid, I'd probably have a front three of Isak on the left, Wilson, and then Joel Linton probably on the right, because I think one of Villa's main attacking threats at the moment, Villa's outball, their outlet a lot of the time, is Moreno. And if Joel Linton's playing there, you know he's capable of probably cutting that off. Do you think that's something we might see?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I feel like it'll be interesting to see how we go about building from the back, just because I do think Newcastle will press high. We like to we've talked about it lots of times, we like to have kind of slow possession in our defensive third, suck the other team out, and then play quickly through the thirds up to Ollie Watkins. Whether we'll get the chance to play our kind of style out from the back will be interesting, or whether we'll do something similar to kind of what we did against Chelsea, where Martinez goes a little bit longer, or we see the clip ball out to the fullbacks a lot to try and switch angles for us to progress up the field. I think the game against Chelsea in the first half, Kamara obviously was playing in that game in midfield, but we liked to try and clip the ball up to McGinn, who was on the right-hand side, who's furthest forward. He managed to hold it up and play second balls as well. So as a secondary option, if they're playing out from the back and Newcastle try and force us and we make a few mistakes, we might try and play that clip ball into midfield. From Newcastle's point of view, I feel like the Joel Linton situation, I tweeted, I think it was when Newcastle played Manchester United, that I couldn't remember a turnaround in a player like Joel Linton. He'd gone from a meme, basically a walking meme, and has been revolutionised and evolutioned into this kind of rampaging number 8 central midfielder. And now he's kind of can play on the left-hand side. He can play in that central midfield, and he does a lot of different jobs for the team. Off the ball, as you say, great presser. But then on the ball, Newcastle, as we'll probably see on Saturday, they play fast, they play direct, and they'll be looking for Joel Linton to win some of those aerial balls. And then the midfield of, we haven't even mentioned Guimaraes yet, who's obviously a top draw. He'll be looking to pick up those balls. Yeah, he'll be looking to pick up those balls in midfield and dictate the game from there.
Yeah, I mean, Emery hasn't had his press conference yet. I think it's unlikely Kamara will be back and feature in this one. But Sai ABFC in the chat saying he's talking as if Dendoncker might play. And I actually agree with him. He's saying Dendoncker will have to have his best game in a Villa shirt. I think there's a case, again, if I was Villa manager, again, God forbid, no one really wants to say that. I think maybe the end of the Forest game last week was a brief insight into what we might do in this game. So Dendoncker coming in and playing alongside Louise, put McGinn back on the right-hand side, where, he's performed well wherever he's been, but he's performed exceptionally on that right-hand side. You then end up playing that 4 central midfielders because of the talent of the opposition that we're playing. We've done that in the harder games sometimes, played 4 central midfielders. And actually, there's also a case that McGinn actually ended the game up front alongside Watkins. That's something I'd really like to see, because you're not playing as an orthodox striker under Emery. You're out of possession, you're very much playing that central area next to Watkins, but in possession you end up all over the place. Because we ended the game with McGinn alongside Watkins, it wouldn't surprise me to see Dendoncker come in, Buendia on the right, and McGinn up there alongside Watkins, because you're a centre-back trying to build from the back like Newcastle will as well. You do not want to be coming up against the pressing of McGinn and Watkins. I think there's a case for bringing Dendoncker in this game. I
think you're right. There is definitely a case for bringing Dendoncker in for this game. I know John McGinn, I think, has spoken in one of his newspaper interviews about when Emery came in and said, where do you want to play? And he was like, anywhere, just not on the bench. And Emery talked to him about playing up front. So, yeah, interesting to see him being used a little bit further forward. I think Dendoncker's an option because not necessarily for McGinn to play up front, but I think it would kind of free up McGinn to play in one of those wide positions and then track the runs of the Newcastle wide players, particularly, if Isak starts on that left-hand side, or somebody with, who likes depth runs like, Willock or a Jacob Murphy, if he switches over to that left-hand side. It'd be interesting to see whether Dendoncker comes in and McGinn shifts to the right, and then Buendia moves into those forward positions. So I think it's definitely an option, and I think one he'll be thinking about seriously for the game.
Because Newcastle are a big side as well, aren't they? You look at their back four. They play obviously Dan Burn at left back, who's huge. Big boys in midfield as well, in Joel Linton, and then Wilson and Isak, who are good in the air as well. Both of them have scored headed goals this season. I think there's a definite case for Dendoncker to come in this game. He's been out of the team for he was injured as well. He picked up some form of injury as well. So he's been out of the team for a long time. But you think of Emery in the past for having plans for certain games with other teams and with Villa. It wouldn't surprise me to do that. I genuinely think that's something that we might see. And also the flip side of that is, let's say, look, Bertrand Traore has come on and scored twice. If you play Bertrand Traore, Villa don't really, depend on what happens with Bailey's fitness as well, Villa don't really have any attacking impetus to bring off the bench if Traore plays, to try and change the game, change the direction of the game if it's not going well. So to me, everything adds up to do that Dendoncker thing. I know it's harsh on Traore because he's come off the bench and scored in 2 games running, but in some ways as well, it shows he's good to come off the bench. So maybe we should just do that again.
Yeah, and set pieces for Newcastle, you mentioned them being a big side. I think that's been one of their real strengths this season. I think they're really high on the charts for set piece goals and set piece XG as well. So that's been one of their major strengths. And I'm not sure what the situation is with Bailey. I'm sure we'll find out later this afternoon. He had that injury, but then
he looked like he was pictured in training.
We saw some training pictures. So it'd be interesting to find out whether he's fit enough to start or whether, again, he'll be a possible option off the bench. But if he's not fit enough to start, that might make the decision for Emery in order to bring in Dendoncker as a central midfield option and then shift either McGinn or Buendia out wide for that one. But yeah, I mean, Newcastle as an aerial threat, they scored, didn't they? I think from a set piece in the 4-0 game at St James's Park. Although you try to forget that game because it was just a no-show really from Villa in that game. So set piece is going to be key, and we haven't had a great record in defending set pieces this season. So that's going to be a real interesting area where we've got to try and win that battle.
It's mainly under Gerrard, though, wasn't it? The set piece problems. I don't recall us having too many problems under Emery. I remember Stevenage scoring, and then didn't Arsenal scored a similar goal to that Stevenage goal against it. But especially in recent weeks, Newcastle have got the best defensive record in the Premier League. But in recent weeks, there can't be many teams that have got a better defensive record than us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can take heart from the Brentford game, Newcastle against Brentford, because I didn't watch the game in its entirety, but seeing the highlights, looked like Schade caused them real problems with his pace. So, Newcastle will try and kind of play an aggressive line. So it'd be really interesting to see whether Ollie Watkins manages to get in behind and find some space in between probably Shearer and Botman at the back. So, Ivan Toney and Schade for Brentford caused them real problems in that game. And it was obviously kind of an interesting game with the penalties in that game anyway, but that could be a way for us to get through Newcastle in that point, playing a little bit more direct sometimes and making sure we manage to get Ollie Watkins in behind.
Yeah, I'm just thinking as well, Ramsey's played some games on the left recently and some games on the right. I think the last couple he started on the right. On the McGinn role, because of Trippier and he's a source of a lot of their goals, McGinn on the left might be a decent shout for Villa.
Yeah, I mean, Newcastle like the little combination on the right hand side. I mean, when Miguel Almiron's fit, they like to do the little 1-2s with Guimaraes, Almiron, Trippier to the byline, and the cutback for either a striker or a midfielder charging into the penalty area. That's a combination that they created some chances in the game at St James's Park against Villa as well, and that's a combination that they use quite a lot on that right hand side. So Trippier's one of their key danger, not only getting forward and crosses into the box, but set piece delivery as well from him is an obvious strength. So it'd be interesting to see whether McGinn or Ramsey kind of flip over to that left hand side, because it is probably the strongest area that Newcastle create their chances from.
Yeah, Poods is saying in the live chat as well, I think we have both sides scoring for sure. think I'd agree with that. I think it's a good pickup by BT Sport, by the way. I know we both work for Sky, but I think it's a good pickup by BT Sport, this game being on television. It's going to be a good one for the neutral and a big one for Villa fans and Newcastle fans that aren't there as well, because there should be goals, and Villa, of course, have scored in every game under Unai Emery so far.
Yeah, the story around the lunchtime game, sometimes it can be a little bit flat, but I just feel like this game has got the potential to be a real cracker. Fireworks at both ends of the pitch, and obviously we've got a great scoring record under Unai Emery, and Newcastle are scoring goals for fun. So it's definitely going to be both sides scoring. I can't see Newcastle keeping Villa out, and I can't see us keeping Newcastle out either. So it'll be a scoring game. Whether we're able to come out on the right side of it, it'll be down to the finishing, I suppose.
And I guess the thing is, even if we end up losing tomorrow, which is possible, it's important to take into account the fact that we're even involved in something that's such a big game, 6v3. That's a huge thing at this stage under Unai Emery, and we've still got games from the teams around. It's our hardest game left this season. I know we've got to go to Anfield, and they're pretty imperious at home despite having a rocky season. But you could argue this is actually our hardest game that we've got left. If we get through this unscathed, confidence will be so high. The momentum that we will gather could see us through to get in Europe.
Yeah, hardest. Yeah, I mean, I think it's because it probably means quite a lot in terms of where Villa might finish at the end of the season, this game. And it's obviously a test of where we're at in our progression as well as a team. So that gives it a little bit more meaning, this game against Newcastle. I think for the end of the season, yeah, I mean, it might well turn out to be the hardest game. And when you look at pressure, I wonder what the message will be to the Villa players for this game, because everyone knows that Villa are ahead of themselves at this point in time than where Villa might expect. So is the message to the Villa players in this game, go out there, play with freedom. We're not expected to be here. It's a free hit to go out and beat Newcastle. And possibly on the other end of the scale, Newcastle players are going into it thinking, this is going to be a really hard game. We're on the verge of doing something we haven't done in 25 years, 30 years, finishing in a Champions League position, getting European football to Newcastle United. Are they going into it with a little bit more pressure on their shoulders? That's why they might not want to sit back and soak up pressure. They'll want to try and get on the front foot as soon as they can and maybe try and get a goal early against Villa. So I think from both sides, there's different meanings and different kind of significance to this game.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I think whatever happens this week, and I do think Newcastle will get Champions League football next season. I'm not so certain on Villa, but they've given themselves an excellent chance to get European football. Which, I mean, if both teams are in Europe come the end of the season, they've both had incredible seasons, and Eddie Howe and Unai Emery deserve a huge amount of credit. John Banbury saying in the live chat, 1-1. I reckon I'd be happy with that. That's my prediction as well. 1-1. That's what I think it'll be this weekend. What about you, Dave Reid?
Yeah, I mean 1-1, either 1-1 or 2-2. I would expect. So, I think we've scored quite a lot of early goals at Villa Park under Unai Emery. So, can we get an early goal, put Newcastle under some pressure? Yeah, but I can see a score draw. I'll go 1-1 as well, probably.
Yeah, Christopher Hammond saying 2-2. JAS in the comments says 0-3 to Newcastle, hoping for something different, but it just seems like a horrible matchup for Villa. I mean, I'll be very upset if this time. I'll be very upset tomorrow if that is the case.
We've got a mag in the comments.
I don't. Is he? I don't remember. I don't remember, or she. I don't remember seeing JAS in the live chat before. So I'm a little bit suspicious of that, but everyone's entitled to their opinion. If that's what you think the score is going to be, that's what you think the score is going to be. Dave Reid and your lapel mic, thank you very much for joining me today on the Villa View, and thanks to everyone that's tuned in live as well. Quite a lot of people here for midday on a Friday, so we appreciate the people getting involved in the chat live and watching the show, and thanks to those that will go on and watch it as well. Do go and check out the Stato preview as well from yesterday. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the lead up to the game stats wise, so go and have a look at that. And those of you that are at Villa Park tomorrow, hopefully I'll see some of you there. I can't tell you how excited. I'll probably wake up nervous now, but at the moment I'm just really excited and looking forward to the game. Subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on, and let us know what you're thinking in the comments as well if you are going on to watch the video not live. Thanks to Dave Reid again. Thanks to Adam for producing. Have a great Friday. Up the Villa.